Systems documentation maturity is an essential aspect of an organization's operational efficiency and risk management strategy. It encompasses the organization's ability to accurately and comprehensively document its internal systems, processes, and procedures. This documentation not only serves as a reference tool for current employees, but also aids in the training of new staff, supports compliance efforts, and facilitates the identification and mitigation of operational risks. The VALassess framework provides a structured approach for managers to evaluate and enhance their organization's systems documentation practices, ensuring that these practices support organizational learning, efficiency, and compliance. An organization that exhibits high systems documentation maturity is characterized by its comprehensive and accessible documentation. This includes clear, up-to-date records of all systems and processes, from operational workflows to its infrastructure and compliance protocols. VALassess aids organizations in assessing the completeness and accessibility of their systems documentation, identifying gaps where additional documentation is needed or where existing documentation could be made more accessible to staff. Mature organizations in terms of systems documentation prioritize the regular review and updating of their documentation. This ensures that all records reflect the current state of operations and systems, accounting for changes in processes, technology, and regulatory requirements. Through VALassess, managers can evaluate their processes for reviewing and updating documentation, identifying opportunities to improve these processes to ensure that documentation remains relevant and accurate. Another aspect of systems documentation maturity is the integration of documentation practices into the organizational culture. This involves fostering an environment where the creation, maintenance, and use of documentation are valued and practiced routinely by all employees. VALassess supports organizations in developing strategies to embed documentation practices into daily operations, ensuring that maintaining high-quality documentation becomes a shared responsibility across the organization. Effective systems documentation also requires a commitment to leveraging technology to enhance documentation practices. This includes using document management systems, collaborative platforms, and other digital tools to create, store, and share documentation more efficiently and securely. VALassess aids in assessing the organization's use of technology for documentation purposes, guiding managers towards technological solutions that can improve the efficiency, security, and accessibility of systems documentation. Organizations with a high level of systems documentation maturity actively engage stakeholders in the documentation process. This stakeholder engagement ensures that documentation is not only comprehensive and accurate, but also user-friendly and relevant to the needs of different user groups within the organization. VALassess assists managers in evaluating their stakeholder engagement practices in relation to systems documentation, identifying ways to enhance collaboration and ensure that documentation meets the needs of all stakeholders. For managers, implementing the VALassess framework to improve systems documentation maturity is a strategic endeavor. It involves leading the organization in recognizing the value of comprehensive and accessible documentation, ensuring that documentation practices are integrated into the organizational culture, and leveraging technology to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of documentation practices. Managers play a role in executing systems documentation, setting standards for documentation quality, and ensuring that the organization remains committed to maintaining high-quality, up-to-date documentation. The journey to achieving high systems documentation maturity is ongoing and requires a commitment to continuous improvement. It demands a strategic and integrated approach to documentation, ensuring that documentation practices support organizational learning, operational efficiency, and compliance. Organizations that excel in systems documentation maturity benefit from improved operational efficiency, enhanced compliance, and reduced risk. By applying the VALassess framework, managers can guide their organizations toward realizing high levels of systems documentation maturity, ensuring that documentation practices support the organization's strategic objectives and operational needs. Elevating systems documentation maturity is essential for organizations aiming to enhance their operational efficiency, support compliance efforts, and mitigate risks. Through focused efforts on developing, maintaining, and leveraging comprehensive and accessible documentation, organizations can ensure that their systems and processes are thoroughly documented, supporting organizational learning and efficiency.